All right, so who has noticed not only the whole thing of, for some reason, the Democratic Party really having an issue with the Russians kind of out of nowhere, uh, last 2 years of the Obama administration. And nationalist Catholics seem to have an issue with Russia. So far right wing Catholics, too. Trying to sort out what's going on with those Russians, right? Well, this is what I stumbled on when really looking at the actual propagandists who were on YouTube who were Russian. What they definitely were propagandists. Most of this is coming out of not so much Dugin himself, but Dugin's team at Katahan, because his son would be just about Sargon of Akkad's age, or maybe around my age. He's somewhere in that area. Sometimes Slavs, it's hard to exactly tell how old or young they are. Well, Dugin's son apparently is really the creative mind behind the way Katahan put its topics together. And the topics that Katahan chose, that's the really important part. When dealing with propagandists, it's not so much like there's propagandists who are not good at what they do. They do not cause the audience to interpret their message the way they wanted it interpreted. A really good example of, and so you could have propagandists who work super hard. They never change people's opinion of them or their views. One of the really good examples of it, people who work really hard, they just never propagandize properly, is the Young Turks. They should be, people should be inviting them out to dinner every night. But instead, they still can't get interviews with almost anybody in the Democratic Party after a decade or more of being ardent supporters for the party. It's bad propagandizing. Yeah, and so the candidates, these people, they don't want to touch it. They don't want to be associated with it. So then there's people who you almost can't believe how good they are at propagandizing. And this is really epitomized in a lot of the people who make memes. The Russians did a particularly interesting thing that I think a lot of people picked up on. I noticed it's a lot of the people who, they're way up there in brain level. They're writing books. They're giving big seminars. Their YouTube stuff is poetry of the Stoics and stuff like that. What it was Russia knew a large network of our Cold Warriors. They knew about them. These Cold Warriors, they had faced them during World War II. These Cold Warriors we hired from Eastern Europe, Middle Europe, Italy itself, Germany in particular, were what we would call fascists. We hired them to run a number of operation kind of centers out of Europe against the Soviet Union. The Soviets knew a lot about this. So the Soviets had this on a lot of people. Anybody who liked the Soviets would have known about this network if they, in some way, shape, or form. So this would have been somebody like Bernie Sanders would have known we hired people like this and were running them in counter-communism operations and such like. So this is Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. There was another one I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But so this effort to take these people on, because of course most people who would hear something like this would say, but somebody would recognize these people in their own countries and would forbid them from holding office, forbid them from working for the government. So one of these guys became Chancellor of Germany again after the war. One of these guys became Prime Minister of Italy after the war. Remember, the BBC kept Churchill off of it for a reason. They wanted after the war for a lot of people to be very confused about details of it and the people involved. So a lot of the Cold Warriors were basically former fascists. When all the election stuff was happening, Russia had this list of former fascists. That's what the Russian propaganda really was. They alerted lots of people to the fact that there's a reason George Bush knew Osama bin Laden and the family. They were all a part of a movement almost a generation ago of ultra corporateers, and we would think of their ideology as very fascist. And it's just people who were, these are just industrial giants, and they're cobbling what their plans probably as they're probably always trying to work new plans all the time. And a lot of this is everything from how do you keep a hold of the Trans-Arabian tap line? How do you get at the oil under the Golan Heights? Like, how do you secure train lines and supply lines? They have their own imperial designs of their own industrial empires. And Americans have a lot of ideas about what we think the human condition should be. Oh, here, I'll go this way because we got the leaf blowers out. Oregon loves leaf blowers. Oregon loves leaf blowers. But I just wanted to put this out there because a part of these Cold Warriors that we recruited, a part of this becomes a thing that a lot of you have heard of as Gladio A and Gladio B. Now, Ryan Dawson really would map this out in a tenth of the time. But for a lot of the nationalist Catholics, a lot of what your information base, there's a portion of it that had to have come from them because of these misgivings you have about the Russians, which, I mean, you could have misgivings about anybody for any reason, really. But a part of this, they're not as powerful as we want, as we're kind of being sold. Yeah, they have their own problems. They have almost all of America's troubles of maintaining itself into the future. Yeah, they're not doing necessarily any better than us. And they remember they had a baby boom too, of sorts. So, what the fuck? I think, is somebody bumping grime? Somebody's getting grimy. Uh-oh. But bumping those bars. Mate. Nothing but bars. So, I just thought about this because this was something that had been lingering in my mind. That is actually a great way of understanding kind of also what's happening with Obama and all these people. Remember, ISIS and the Azov Battalion in Ukraine, ISIS in Syria. These are leftover mercenaries from these quote-unquote fascists who are our spear against communism. So these are Salafist Muslims, and the Azov Battalion, well, anyone could look that up in Wikipedia, and no one will. No news agency will touch what is well known. These guys took photos in front of fucking flags. I can't believe no one knows this shit. Just can't believe it. That's what the deal is with. If anybody were to really start digging, they would find underneath this lawn, this artificial lawn, they would find these industrialists, and that these industrialists have worldwide plans. Papadopoulos is one of the keys to this in a way. What Papadopoulos, the energy plans he's working on, that's what was going on. That's why we were letting the Muslims invade Europe. That's why, and think about it, the Pope was telling people, don't reject the Muslims. So what's the Catholic Church's game? Why won't the Catholic Church stop siding with Muslim Albanians, and will, because the Muslim Albanians are burning down whole Orthodox villages and nobody's saying a damn thing. The EU won't enforce the laws. There's a bigger game going on here, and there's various power groups, the Democrats and the moderate Catholics, that are playing the next generation, and they're trying to say your nationalist leanings are this fundamental evil that you don't understand. Because think about this, what would happen in the Ummah? Give it a thought. Who would you be competing against if you were a nationalist in the Ummah and you had nut jobs on drugs taking over countries to establish the Caliph, and you were to say, no, but I am a proud Syrian, and they would say, how dare you stand against the establishment of a Caliph, of an Islamic state, being that, according to many schools of Islam, that is kind of one of the key goals, is to establish a Caliph and a caliphate. So in that part of the world too, if, like, say, Egypt is still a country that's majority Muslim. Now they're nationalist. They're being criticized by all of Islam for separating. They haven't changed the religion. It's just that they suddenly don't want to have anything to do with lots of international ties to these weird networks of people who will kill their neighbors. And say that they're doing, and that there's no real explanation of why. We're not getting where, yeah. So when you get this thing of, no, ISIS is not, when people would say ISIS is not Islamic, the reason somebody would interpret it this way, they are not Salafi. To them, the Salafi simply are not Muslims because they're these violent drug-taking whack jobs. This would be totally foreign to them. This would be like if the Mormons took over Italy. This would be foreign to those people. They would be like, those aren't Christians. What are you talking about? So that I've actually had to, like, start piecing together some of this, because I've realized that there's not really anybody outlining clearly, not just what is being covered up in Syria and Ukraine by us, so that we don't really dig. And nobody wants to, because McCain and all them were involved too. And so Romney was involved in this too, because Bain Capital and the finance end of it, they had to get the money from someplace. And there's a lot of money pouring into the Ukraine. And suddenly, Ukraine just decided that they'll take IMF loans. Fancy that, huh? Well, talk to you guys later.